Welcome back. This is module 6 lecture 5. So, this is the last lecture of module 6. In the previous lecture we talked about conversation analysis, and today we will discuss critical discourse analysis. So, both of these together are part of discourse analysis in this that is part of discourse. So, critical discourse analysis, now we have already looked at discourse in terms of conversation. So, discourse primarily refers to not just to talk or text, but to how ways of speaking combine with cultural models to produce and reproduce social meanings and structure. So, in the previous lecture we talked about conversation analysis, where we are where the text itself is the starting point. So, we are not taking into account the various kinds of theoretical positions or cultural baggages and so on. Our point of departure is the text. Here we talk about how language or how text, they have a way to combine with the cultural models, various cultural constructs, how it prominently figures in language structures, that is what we will look at. So, while conversation analysis is mainly descriptive, that may refer to non-linguistic factors, critical discourse analysis has those social, political, ideological positions as main parts. So, in the conversation analysis they might be we might finally arrive at those points, but here it is one of the main constructs. So, what is critical about critical discourse analysis? Let us first understand that. In critical discourse analysis, the analyst is concerned not just with how conversations are structured, but also, because that is what we discussed in the previous lecture, how conversations are structured, but in critical discourse analysis, how that structuring reflects or constitutes power relationships. Every society, wherever you go, every human society has an inherent power structure. There is a hierarchy and there is a way to signal that power structure. So, that is what we do discuss in critical discourse analysis. In other words, the analyst deliberately looks for those covert markers that are used in discourse to handle power equations. Consequently, power and ideology remain the most studied variables in critical discourse analysis. So, that is what the primary difference between critical discourse analysis and conversation analysis. So, the aim of critical discourse analysis is to analyze relationships of dominance, discrimination, power and control. These are all part of the larger entity called power equations. So, the idea of all of these features, so dominance, discrimination, power and control in text as well as in talk. So, in cases where inequalities, like for example, gender differences, something that is very clearly visible in most discourses, are openly acknowledged, CDA shows that such relations are not natural or inevitable, but socially constructed and naturalized. How it is constructed, how it is socially constructed, that is what we study. So, when asymmetrical structures are not directly mentioned, CDA reveals how they are indirectly manifested in language use. For example, parenting magazines assuming mothers as the default audience, all kinds of such magazines. So, this is what we what is critical about critical discourse analysis. So, the social role is CDA aims to make hidden ideologies visible and to question their legitimacy, showing how language sustains inequality. And beyond the moral critique, it explains why and how discriminatory practices such as racism etc. emerge and spread in a particular context, aim for social change. So, this is Faircloth's Marxist view looks at these things. So, it is not just a moral critique, but it also shows how discriminatory processes actually emerge and spread in using language, of course, society. So, these studies, there are various criteria that have been proposed by many scholars. So, we are looking at Van Dijk's criteria here. So, these are the few things that he has listed. It is a problem or issue oriented domain. It studies social problems such as sexism, racism, colonialism and other forms of social inequality. It is not a school or a field, but it is an approach, primarily it is an approach, it is a way of studying the text. It is inter or multidisciplinary, focusing on the relation between discourse and society largely over the broader society. So, including social cognition, politics, culture and so on and so forth. So, this actually spreads over a number of sub-disciplines you can say. So, that is why it is called an approach rather than a school of thought. CDA is part of a broad spectrum of critical studies in humanities and social sciences. So, this is part of many other disciplines. So, it is this spans across disciplines. It pays attention to all levels and dimensions of discourse like grammar, phonology, syntax, semantics and at the same time style, rhetoric, schematic organization, speech act and so on and so forth. So, across a whole range of linguistic features CDA looks at while trying to understand the relationship between discourse and the society. So, studies focus also on other semiotic dimensions like pictures, film, sound, music, various other kinds of communicative events. So, the relations of power, dominance, inequality, these are the primary features, primary domains that are looked at. And so, basically the underlying ideologies with respect to power inequality within any kind of a broader domain like racism, like gender and all that. So, thereby the analysis tries to uncover the implicit, hidden or not immediately obvious discursively enacted dominance or ideologies. So, emphasis is on solidarity with dominated groups, formulating proposals for counter power and counter ideologies. So, social power in CDA, it can be defined as the ability of a social group or institution to control the actions and the worldview of other groups. Social power can come from various kinds of strengths, so military strength, economic resources, persuasive influence, we see it everywhere, right. So, when you look at discourse of various kinds in the various kinds of media as well, print or audio visual, that is a particular way of constructing the discourse. So, depending on who what kind of interest the other person has, what kind of interest whoever is spreading a particular kind of discourse. So, whatever the agenda, if they are in a powerful position, they will be able to shape the discourse. So, that is what basically is the idea. Sometimes it might be coming, the power might come from economic resources, sometimes the military might, all kinds of, there are other kinds of influences, all kinds of influences work in the society. So, how that works with respect to discourse, that is what we look at. So, power is achieved. So, in terms of hegemony, power achieved through consent, where certain groups or ways of being gain prestige and dominance because they are widely accepted as superior. So, whatever is the socially constructed idea of superiority or on whatever variable, if there is a group who is more powerful in terms of whatever kind of variable, then they will that can be used to create consent, manufacturing consent. So, example, standard languages are hegemonic, that is standard languages are considered hegemonic, since even non-standard speakers often accept the standard as inherently superior. So, at every level every kind of discourse can be understood from this kind of a perspective, this kind of a lens. So, conversation analysis and critical discourse analysis differences, the main difference is the role of external information and how analysis is empirically supported. So, in the first case it was CA, as we have said, that it is on entirely text based, but in this case it is external information is also important. 1999 debate is very interesting in this domain. So, exchange between Shegloff and Billig coming from CA and CDA respectively in discourses and society, they highlight the centrality of textual analysis. So, common grounds are both analyze naturally occurring text or talk, both require detailed textual analysis, both can be applied to study social dimension of discourse. So, that is, these are the things where they come together, that is the similarity, but the dissimilarity is of course the non-linguistic differences. So, for example, main divergence is CA focuses on interactional structure, may avoid explicit societal critique, and CDA explicitly aims to address the social injustice. So, that is the primary difference. Both have text as the main starting point, but the ideologies are different, the ultimate goal is different. Methods, CDA is not a method, but a way of viewing the world and how it influences discourses and textual analysis. So, Van Dyke says that CDA is not so much a direction, school or specialization next to many other approaches in discourse, rather it aims to offer a different mode or perspective of the theorizing, analysis and application throughout the whole field. It is not restricted to one field, as we have just seen. So, sociology to language to psychology, you can take any discipline. Discourse historical approach, a method of CDA that analyzes discourse in relation to social historical context. It explores 4 levels of context: the immediate language or text internal context, the intertextual and the interdiscursive relationship between utterance, text, genre and various kinds of discourses. Third will be extra linguistic social and sociological variables, and fourth is the broader socio-political and historical context. So, all of these different kinds of levels can be understood in and explored within this. Then Wodak, for example, studied anti-Semitic stereotyped word which means enemy image in Austria during Wilhelm's 1986 campaign. So, studying the words, studying certain kinds of linguistic terms in terms of the sociological perspective. So, he analyzed discourse events, intertextual references and interdiscursive links. Pragmatics was integrated into CDA for research on slogans and rhetoric in Vienna's elections. Many of such discourses like political discourse, similarly advertisement, the world of advertising is heavily, it has a very high dose of preconceived notions, stereotypes and so on. So, that is why these are the domains that have been studied extensively in terms of how the discourse either creates or reinforces the existing stereotypes. So, this is one such case where election campaigns were used, were studied. He showed how implicature, allusion, presupposition construct the ideological meanings. So, political discourse in this particular case implied the Jewish collusion, criminality and lack of Austrian authenticity. So, how using language, how the discourse created a particular kind of identity for the Jewish people, that is how during the election campaign, this is what they studied. Van Dyke developed socio-cognitive approach to CDA. He connected social and cognitive aspects. So, this is a more recent development in the 2000s, and so like taking into account the recent developments in the broader other disciplines as well. So, he includes cognitive domains as well alongside the social. So, he examines mental representations, because we are talking about cognitive here, discourse processing, ideology and group beliefs. So, mental representations of various things. So, he links cognitive structures to discourse, practices and social inequality. He found denial of racism in elite discourse sustains prejudice. By simply denying, you are sustaining the prejudice that already exists in the society. Discourse reinforces in-group identity, white solidarity and dominance, that is, these are some of his main findings. Similarly, Lazar focuses on feminist critical discourse analysis, how ideologies in discourse perpetuate gender hierarchies in various domains. For example, various ads have been studied, family life ads examination. So, egalitarian on surface while claiming to be egalitarian, but they reinforced conservative roles, men are breadwinners and women are caregivers. So, various kinds of such ads have been studied. Ads for women analysis by Lazar, for example, what seemed to be pro-women self-care slogans trivialized concerns tied worth to appearance. This is a constant criticism of the advertising world while trying to sell cosmetics or various other kinds of such kind of appearance oriented products, typically targeting women. So, the baseline is that you are not good enough, as whatever you are is not good enough. So, you need this kind of helping hand. So, thereby you buy this product. So, the studies critical discourse analysis looks at that particular problematic aspect. So, advertising, while they are promoting what they call pro women, self care and such kind of patronizing terms, what they actually are working on is the same old stereotypical understanding of women and their worth. So, this is have been studied a lot. Lazar's work reinforced low social value of women, part of post feminist discourse where equality is assumed to be already achieved. Promotes reclaiming femininity via cosmetics, pink floral aesthetics instead of challenging inequality. This is what you see all around you. So, you are not these are things that have been given to women as some kind of reclaiming femininity rather than challenging inequality, real inequality. These actually reinforce the inequality. You need cosmetics to be good enough, that kind of thing. CDA with corpus linguistics is also another domain. So, Orpin examined political corruption terms in UK newspapers, harsh terms like bribery, graft etc. for foreign countries, but for the softer terms for improprieties, sleaze etc. reserved for Britain. So, newspaper articles when they talk about corruption in a different country versus when they talk about corruption in their own country, they use different kinds of terms. In other countries it is more harsh term, in their own country it is soft. So, this reveals discursive double standards in corruption narratives. This is how it is in the world of narratives. So, it is always double standard is always there, and this is what CDA with respect to corpus linguistics looks at. Baker et al. Analyzed newspapers on refugees, asylum seekers, migrants etc. He found the use of collocations and metaphors such as flood, stream etc. to dehumanize migrants as disaster. So, you are using these metaphors which are basically natural disasters, and if you are using those terms with migrants, naturally you are putting them in the same bracket. CDA with ethnography, that has also been another domain. So, CDA actually this shows you that how CDA is actually inter as well as multidisciplinary. Various kinds of domains can use CDA as a way of looking at it, as an angle to study. So, highlighted the productive relationship between CDA and ethnography. He stressed examining context and text relationship. He also suggested broadening the notion of context to physical, linguistic and social, societal, cognitive, linguistic all together. So, he introduced the idea of interdiscursivity. Discourses from one context are de or recontextualized in another. So, for example, Fairclough examined Blair's foreword to 1998 UK white paper, which mixed economic development discourse with political discourse. So, this kind of studies have also been carried out. Norman Fairclough's model. So, this model talks about various strategies, various aspects of it. So, for example, discourse first in an abstract sense as a category which designates the broadly semiotic elements of social life. So, this is our primary keyword, and secondly it is defined through its relation to and difference from two other categories like genre and style. So, this is where the difference between discourse and genre and style remains. So, Fairclough's model has three dimensions primarily. It is considered the core of the field of CDA, the first to create theoretical framework leading to CDA development. So, his aim is to reveal any hidden relationship between language, power, ideology for the purpose of raising consciousness or awareness. So, the three stages are these. First stage 1 is description. It is concerned with examining the formal linguistic properties of texts or discourse fragment that can be either visual, verbal, text and so on. So, it provides the researcher with an amount of freedom and flexibility of choosing the linguistic elements. So, first and foremost you look at the data, what are the linguistic properties, then the interpretation follows. So, it is concerned with the relationship between the text and the interaction, with seeing the text as a product of a process of production and as a resource in the process of interpretation. So, it is not out of nowhere, the text is not devoid of connection with the background. So, it is a process, it is a product of an entire process, that is the idea, that is how it is interpreted. So, for example, the situational context like time and place of the text production, the intertextual context, the different participants of the discourse, and so on and so forth. So, it is an exploration of the process of production keeping in mind these features. And then the third is the explanation. It is concerned with the relationship between interaction and the social context, with the social determination of the processes of production and interpretation and their social effects. So, first the text, then the interpretation, and finally, how you explain it. So, these are the three stage, this is the three stage model that has been given. This is a schematic representation. Van Dyck also gave a model of CDA. So, principles and aims, he talks about, focuses on the discourse dimension of power in abuse, injustice and inequality, guided by pressing social issues. Then the idea of power and dominance. So, it tries to understand the nature of social power and dominance, how those attributes are reflected in discourse and so on, and power involves certain kinds of control. So, it pertains to action and cognition. So, he includes all of these important aspects in his model. CDA focuses on the discursive strategies that legitimate control or naturalize the social order or relations of inequality. So, basically what are the strategies in the discourse that legitimizes the inequality? Inequality is there, and how is it that we legitimize it or make it natural, naturalize it, that is what the study is. And then CDA is also interested in power abuse or dominance, that is whenever there is a power structure it will be abused, that is also part of study. And discourse and access. So, language users have more or less freedom in the use of special discourse genres or styles, or in the participation in certain events and contexts. And CDA reveals that there is a direct link between how much social power a group has and the extent of their access to discourse. This is very interesting because depending on the power, so whoever is more powerful will obviously have more access to creating that narrative, so the discourse. So, that is all again. Social cognition has also been a recent phenomenon. This is now added into the critical discourse analysis. So, modern power has a major cognitive dimension that has been studied extensively. So, two major dimensions: how dominance is enacted, expressed or legitimized in the structure of text and talk, and how these structures affect audiences. So, these are some of the aspects. Of course, this is a rather broad and rich field, but with this we come to the end. We have given you broad outlines of what is critical discourse analysis, how this is different from another similar type of analysis, which is conversation analysis. Both are part of discourse analysis, how they are similar, how they are different, and within critical discourse analysis what is the primary aim, how does the analysis actually go ahead, and what are the main models. So, we have discussed about Van Dyck's model as well as the older models. So, this is where we will end our lecture 5. So, with this we also end the module 6. Thank you.